Welcome to a new episode of The Career Changers. Our guest today is Alice Ye, certified career clarity coach who helps high achievers stuck in unsatisfying careers to find the freedom to live the life they want. As a textbook overachiever, she checked off all the boxes that were supposed to guarantee a happily ever after life of professional fulfillment and personal achievement. Expensive education and 14 years of international corporate experience at Fortune 500 companies, as well as early late stage startup. She also worked abroad as an expat, took a year-long sabbatical, and made her own career changes after getting laid off 3 times. But something still felt missing. Today, we are going to talk about her career change journey, how she found her purpose, and normalizing setbacks on the path to success. Hi, Alice. Welcome to the Career Changers.
Hi, Alyssa. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, and I'm excited too. So let's start with the first question that we ask to all of our guests. How did you start your professional life, or better, what was your first job?
So I started my career as a financial analyst at JP Morgan in New York City because back when I graduated from undergrad, that was what everyone wanted to be back then, and where you went to work in finance if you wanted to make a lot of money. But through that experience, I actually got to work and live abroad in Hong Kong for a year, in London for 3 years. So I am grateful for that experience.
Mm. And what was your dream job when you were a child?
I always wanted to be a teacher. I really loved learning new things and I wanted to help other people learn. So it's funny that I wanted to be a teacher as a child because that's eventually I've come first full circle as a coach now.
That's something that happened in the majority of cases. We start with our desire and then we go a different direction to come back to our original ambitions. So, what is your educational background?
Yes, I did my undergrad at Princeton University where I studied operations research and financial engineering. It's a lot of words for basically studying statistics, economics, and finance. And it's funny that I ended up going to Wall Street for my first job because I did definitely got a lot of C's in my finance and econ classes. After working at JP Morgan for 4 years, I went to get my MBA at Wharton Business School, where I focused on marketing and entrepreneurial business management.
Mm. And how and why did you decide to change your career?
Yeah, so I've actually changed my career, I would say multiple times. Every change was a shift in a different direction. The first change was obviously after business school, which I use as your traditional path to change your career, going from finance into tech, where I worked in sales at Google. And that's where I moved to San Francisco, where I'm based now. But eventually, after every change, I was always looking for something to feel more fulfilled because eventually I'd get bored in my job and I felt like I lacked purpose. And was always seeking a promotion because that's what you were supposed to do, even though I didn't necessarily feel like it would lead me to the fulfillment I was looking for. But I always hit a ceiling and I felt like couldn't get what I wanted. And no matter what I did, it wasn't enough. So every time I felt bored, I would change jobs, change my career, but eventually go through the same cycle all over again because I was seeking purpose, but I wasn't really finding it until this most recent change where I became a coach.
Mm. And when and how did you decide to become a life coach?
Through working with my experience, I was feeling that lack of purpose. I felt stuck in my career. I had been laid off 2 times before, and I felt I wasn't really finding what I was looking for. And so I decided to work with a coach because I just felt stuck and uncertain. I knew I wanted to change, but I didn't know what that change looked like or what to do. And by working with a coach, I expressed all my feelings. I explored my core values, went back to the basics of thinking about what I wanted to do as a child. And through all of that, what I learned was that the common thread of what I really enjoyed was the idea of helping people and teaching them. And coaching and mentoring was always the thing I enjoyed the most throughout all of my entire career. And I decided to pursue coaching, my coaching certification. And it's funny because when I decided to start doing that, I actually got laid off a couple of weeks later from my most recent role. And so that was my third layoff. And I decided, okay, it's the universe telling me to go all in on this. So that happened last year, and I've been coaching since then.
Yes, and those are very challenging times. And did you have anyone that was at that time, apart this coach that was supporting you, anyone else that was a source of support for you during those difficult moments?
Yeah, obviously, I have my friends and family. I had the coach I was working with. And essentially, what I like to do is have a board of advisors or a support. So, thinking about running your life like you're the CEO of your life or career, and having a board of support of advisors or people who support you, and going to them in times of need. Each one covers like a different area, because not a single person can be the one person to go to advice for your every single area of your life. And yes, I have different types of people that I go to for different types of support.
Mhm. So let's talk about normalizing setback on the path to success. How do you personally define success and failure? And have your definition changed after facing setbacks?
Yeah, so my definition of success used to be get a stable, secure job at a well-known company with a brand name and prestige and make a lot of money, and that's success. But as you can see, that's how I started out my career. But now my definition of success has changed. Now I want to be able to have the freedom, both in a time perspective and financial, to live life on my own terms, and being able to feel like I have control over my time, as well as having the means to do what I want and when I want, and not be restricted to a specific job or role, or that prevents me from doing the things that I want to do. And in terms of failure, I see failure as a learning opportunity. I work with high achievers who essentially are people like me, who where I was like back, a couple years ago, where I feel stuck and unsure of what to do next within their careers. And these people tend to be perfectionists, and I know because I used to be like that. And you're taught to be the best and work as hard as you can, and you'll find success no matter what happens, as long as you work hard. But in reality, that's not necessarily true. Yes, it is important to work hard, but the key is to focus your efforts and energy where it makes sense. You can't operate at your 110% all the time. Otherwise, you'll get burnt out, and it doesn't always necessarily lead to the success and results that you actually want. When I got laid off the first time, I definitely realized that working hard, it doesn't necessarily lead you to the success you're looking for. You need more than that, especially when success is defined by society or other outside influences like parents, where it's all about the focus on money and status and prestige. So you need to find your own definition of success and prioritize what's important to you.
Mhm. And in your experience, how do setbacks typically affect someone's motivation and confidence, and how can one rebuild them?
Yeah, so I think as high achievers, we're so used to success and being the best that you're actually afraid to take risks, because you're afraid of failure, afraid of judgment, and the unknown. But in reality, the setbacks actually lead you to success, because they are learning opportunities. And what I like to say is, if you're not failing, you're not learning. And so I know that that first failure can really affect your motivation and confidence, but by failing often, you learn to become resilient so that you can bounce back quickly and not let the failures affect your motivation and confidence too much. And so you do need to take risks and chances and test things out to see how they go. Our brains are always trying to protect us by telling us all the reasons why we can't do something. What if we fail? What if it doesn't work out? But what we need to do is actually focus on the possibilities. So why not try? What could happen if we succeed? And not every risk or opportunity you do needs to be like a big giant leap into the unknown. You can start small where the failure is not too big of a deal if it doesn't work out, and that helps build your confidence and motivation. Like try a new activity for an hour, or from a career perspective, reaching out to someone you don't know on LinkedIn to learn about their job and career that you're interested in. And what's the worst case? They say no, or they don't respond. You're not worse off than you were before, but what if they say yes? So taking little steps to put yourself in that situation of the unknown.
Mm. And are there any techniques or practice you recommend for regaining motivation and confidence after a setback?
Yeah, so I think it's important to focus on the learnings and find ways to think about the things that you learned from that experience and what would you do differently. And then think about what you can do to regain your confidence, things that make you happy or things that help you build confidence where you feel like you're doing things that you're really good at. And eventually just make the goals that you're thinking about small to and achievable. And as soon as you hit those goals, it helps build that confidence and motivation since you'll have a sense of that forward momentum. Yeah.
Mm. What type of advice would you give to anyone who is rethinking their goals after a setback?
Yeah. Again, it's thinking about, okay, what have I learned from this experience? What could possibly what could you have done differently, and just yeah, focusing on the positive to turn those setbacks into a learning opportunity.
Mm. So when you had your own experience, you went through your own challenging times, you had a coach already. So in some ways you were a little bit protected. And then maybe you had a support system. But this is not necessarily what happened to everyone. How can
Mhm.
someone ensure that they get the support they need during difficult times, so they find the right type of support network?
Yeah, so that's where I mentioned about having that board of advisors or support, thinking about who you would go to for advice on certain things. And not everybody has the advice that you would want to care or think about. You wouldn't go to your single friend with no kids for advice on parenting, for example. I know that I love my parents, but I wouldn't necessarily go to them for advice on careers because they haven't lived the life that I lived, and there's a generational difference when it comes to thinking about your career. Yeah, so really thinking about who you admire, who you want to, and who can provide that support and advice that you would care about in specific different contexts of what matters to you. And at the end of the day, remember that it's still all advice, and ultimately you're still the one making the decisions. So it's okay if you still want to follow your own gut feeling despite what everyone else says. And yeah, it is helpful to have a neutral third person like a coach or therapist to help you figure things out, because they won't have as much of a biased opinion as other people who know you more closely.
Mm. So based on your experience working with clients, how do you maintain resilience and a positive mindset in the face of setbacks?
I think it's important to celebrate your wins and achievements, no matter how small. We're often so quick to move on to the next thing as soon as we hit a milestone, so that we don't actually stop and appreciate ourselves and all the work that we've done. Whereas on the flip side, when we fail or experience a setback, we spend a lot of time replaying things in our heads, thinking about if what if we had done this instead? What if this had gone this way? And all the what if situations. So the amount of time we spend on a setback versus a success is a little bit disproportionate. And so I think it's to maintain that resilience and positive mindset, it is important to think about the positives and your wins. And that also helps you keep up your confidence and motivation.
Mhm. So if we go back to when we talk about how to define success and failure, many times let's say, especially in the corporate world, or mainly when we talk about our jobs, it's easiest to see when everything goes well, that's a success. And then if something goes wrong, that's a failure. But, and it's easy maybe also to, in that case, to develop negative feeling towards ourselves. How can we instead develop more self-compassion and forgiveness when dealing with personal or professional setbacks in our lives?
It's incredibly important to be kind to yourself, especially when facing the setbacks and failures, because everyone will experience a failure or setback. They will definitely happen. So it's okay to give yourself the time you need to feel your feelings and sit in them. I know I've experienced, I've talked about how I went through 3 layoffs. And the very first one, I definitely went through the 5 stages of grief, the
Mm.
anger, the shock, negotiating, and then acceptance. And so I think it is important to acknowledge and feel your feelings and be kind to yourself. We are unfortunately our own harshest critics, and so the things we say to ourselves in our heads are often very harsh. And so what I like to say to people in terms of clients is think about yourself from a third person perspective, as if you were your best friend or your closest family member who's going through the same thing that you're going through right now. You wouldn't say the things that you necessarily say to yourself to them. So what would you say to them if they were in your shoes or your position, and think about that type of encouragement that you would give versus the thoughts that you may be having. So yeah, so I think thinking about yourself creating a little bit of a distance for yourself to think about yourself from a third person perspective definitely helps with the idea of being kind to yourself and self-compassion.
I do really like that. I think it can definitely work. Sometimes we are kinder to someone else than to ourselves. And so, do you think
Yeah.
that's the trick to shift a perspective and view failure as a learning opportunity instead of as a failure?
Yeah, definitely. I think the trick is to shift to that perspective. Every failure or setback is a learning opportunity because you now have learned something that you didn't know before. And there may be things you would do differently. And so sometimes it might be hard to see in the moment, but after some time or some distance, after some time you've had to process, you can think about the learnings. And I always think of the failures as there's always like a silver lining. And for me, my first layoff led me to be able to take a year off from work and pursue personal passions like yoga teacher training and traveling and starting a travel blog. So there's always the flip side of things, and that's really how you can think about shifting that perspective.
Mm. So, looking back at your journey, is there been a particular setback that you now consider a crucial part of your success story, and why?
For me, I felt all my layoffs really, they were setbacks, but each one enabled me to learn something new and do a career change. And I mentioned that the first layoff from Google, it allowed me to pursue personal interests. I got to take a year off of work. And when I decided to go back to work, I actually pivoted from the tech world and started working at a hospitality startup because I love to travel and the travel industry, and so I wanted to work there. But unfortunately, COVID hit when I was at that company, and so there was no more travel. So that's when I went through my second layoff, and then I got a new job at another AI tech startup that was in retail. And so that's another shift into a completely new industry. But after the layoffs that were happening across all of the tech industry last year and even into this year, that's when that third layoff allowed me to pivot into career coaching. So I think seeing the setbacks, you can see that as a new opportunity to actually try something new. And for me, each of these layoffs at the time were definitely a shock or disappointment, but they eventually led to something else.
So we are reaching the end of this episode, but we still have a few more questions. And before then, that if anyone would like to reach out to you, how and where they can find you?
They can find me on Instagram at Hey Alice Yay, or my website has a lot of information about my background, what it's like to work with me, and that you can visit that at aliceyaycoaching.com.
Thank you. What advice would you give to someone experiencing a setback for the first time in their life, in their career, and feeling uncertain about their future?
Yeah. So my advice is really, it's okay that setbacks happen because they help you grow. And if you're uncertain about your future, there's actually three areas to think about. And this is what I work with my clients to help them when they're feeling uncertain about their career and what to do next. And so the first is really around purpose. And the idea is to start thinking about what your ideal end goal is. So visualize what your ideal day or future would look like. And the reason is because you need to know what the goal is in order to move towards that. So, what do you want that to look like? What makes you feel fulfilled and excited? What can give you that feeling of purpose and meaning? And then you work backwards to figure out, okay, what do you need to get there? Which takes us to the second pillar, the second area of alignment. What are your priorities that are currently not in line with what you're envisioning for the future? And where are the gaps? What do you need to do to get there? And then that takes us to the third pillar, which is around mindset. And that's where you've identified what you need to do, but something could be holding you back from moving forward. So usually it's the fears of the unknown, the fear of failure. So, what fears or limiting beliefs are you struggling with? And work on building that confidence and resilience to help you get there and reach that goal. Yeah, so that's really the three things to think about when you are feeling uncertain and want that clarity for what to do next.
Mm. And really, now the last question, if you could give yourself a piece of advice, what would you say to your younger self?
I felt like I spent a lot of time when I was younger just following what people said to do, following what society or my parents said was the best thing to do. But I think really my advice would be to really take the time to understand yourself and don't worry so much about what other people think. Follow your own path according to your own definition of success. And ultimately it's okay to fail because you're learning from those failures. So take those opportunities to take a risk. As a high achiever, I know that the striving for perfectionism and being the best is actually something that holds you back. Stop settling and playing it safe. You're the CEO of your life and career. You should take control and be in the driver's seat of your life and stop waiting for things to happen. Life is too short. We spend one third of our day working at least, and don't spend all that time in a job that you're unhappy with. You should take action to create the change that you want rather than waiting for things to happen.
Thank you so much, Alice, for joining us today, sharing your inspirational career change story and wisdom with our listeners.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. And a last message for our listeners, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review and tune in next week for a new inspirational episode of the Career Changers. Thank you.